everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Cynical Challenge podcast. My name is Grayson Caduza, joining you from Edmonton, Alberta. We're recording this on a Sunday at about lunchtime. As you can see, Jeff Salisbury in the middle of enjoying a delicious ice cream treat from an undisclosed restaurant location. No sponsors yet. We also have Jeff Paulus, gracious enough today to join us from St. Albert. JP, how are we?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. It's a bit sheepish coming back on the show because my replacement last episode is way better than me.
Yeah, Sandra's really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we couldn't agree to terms with her, unfortunately. Otherwise, she would have been signed. So
too expensive for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had to stay with the cheaper option.
Let's be honest, too intelligent for us.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, she was great. So thanks again to her. If you haven't watched episode 8, it's completely focused on the women's game. Definitely check that out. We also have Jeff Salisbury on the line from Saskatoon, who I'm sure has been slightly intoxicated since about noon on Friday. Sally, how are you doing? Have you come down a little bit yet?
Well, I'm in a very celebratory mood this weekend, so I thought I'd treat myself to an unnamed ice cream treat here at lunchtime. It's Smarties, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering, because that's the best one.
It's the big question.
But yeah, I was at work when that announcement dropped at 10 a.m. our time, and I couldn't function for the rest of the morning. Couldn't do it. I was installing some metal shelving in our shelving area in the warehouse, and I basically just had to kind of hide myself underneath one of the shelving areas and just sort of let it all flood over me.
That's fair. So of course, if you haven't heard, which I'm sure you have, the announcement that Sally's referencing is that the Canadian Premier League and Saskatchewan have seemingly come to an agreement. Living Sky Sports and Entertainment, headed by Al Simpson, to a Premier League team, but it's contingent on a stadium agreement, getting something built in time at Prairieland Park in Saskatoon. Great location for a potential stadium. I guess, Sally, you're kind of the guy in the know. Just maybe your initial reaction, what you thought of kind of who's backing it, and the potential for this project to officially become official in the coming months and years.
Yeah, for sure. So everybody's probably familiar with Joe Bellin, who was the principal behind the Saskatchewan Summer Soccer Series group. But Al Simpson was one of the individuals that he brought into the fold just before that the summer series happened last year. Al has operated a number of different media companies. So he has just intricate knowledge of how to put on those types of events. And, he was the right guy to bring on to start pulling these types of things off. And about, I don't know, maybe around this time last year, all of a sudden we noticed that a new company had been formed, Living Sky Sports and Entertainment. I can't remember, one of the guys in the Wheatpool group found that link, and we took a look at it, and it clearly stated that the organization was created to try and bring some form of professional soccer to the province. And we knew that when the pandemic hit, Joe had kind of stepped away from things. We were just about to have FC Edmonton in for a friendly last spring when the pandemic really hit, and then when all of that had to get binned, Joe kind of stepped back from things just because it was such a volatile atmosphere out there with all the unknowns of how long the pandemic was going to last, et cetera. So Al kind of picked things up from there, and it's the group that he's gone ahead and put together, the Living Skies S&E group, that are the ones who have signed the memorandum of understanding with the league. So yeah, now we're sitting at a place where ridiculous and way overblown controversy over the loss of the Marquess Downs horse racing track is the initial blemish on on the move to finally get a pro team here. So if people aren't really aware of kind of what's gone down, Marquis Downs has been a horse racing track in the city at Prairieland Park for a bit over 50 years in the same location. Horse racing here in the province as a whole has been on a steady decline for a number of decades. I think already by the late 80s, there were some rumblings that things weren't going all that smoothly with pro horse racing. And I mean, Queensborough Downs in Regina, I think had been closed down, might have even been back in the 90s when that happened. They have Evraz Place built there now, which is, pardon me, the soccer center. And then there's 4 hockey rinks that are part of that complex. But, so pro horse racing here has sort of been on the decline for quite a while. And we know that Prairieland had been wanting to essentially get out of that type of business now since about 2009. And when the pandemic hit, I mean, all horse racing activities had to stop too. So that industry ground to a halt. And I think that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for that racetrack. I think even if Al's group hadn't come forward, I doubt that Prairieland would have continued on that relationship with Marquis. They probably would have ceased operations anyway. But I mean, the big problem is that Mark Regier, who's the CEO of Prairieland, his comments to the media really have built this narrative that professional soccer coming to the city is the reason why Marquis Downs is getting closed. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is that the pandemic is what killed that racetrack. I mean, like I say, it was the final nail in the coffin. It's unfortunate. Nobody wants to see Marquis Downs go. It's a great place for hosting events. They were getting, decent crowds going out to the races the last few years, but overall the industry was just having issues. So it's unfortunate to see that happen, but Prairieland's been looking for something to be able to redevelop that part of their space. And Al's group came in right at the right time. I mean, Joe was already speaking with Prairieland about not only the Marquis area, but also the exhibition grandstand. And until the announcement came out the other day, all of us were still under the impression that the exhibition grandstand is where Prairieland was really planning on doing that development of building out a stadium. But I do remember Joe having told us that Prairieland was trying to push that Marquis location quite a bit more heavily in their conversation. So I think honestly, Prairieland has probably been planning out what the redevelopment of that Marquis location was going to look like now. Well, I mean, for at least 3 years, because Joe started talking about Prairieland as a potential venue 3 years ago. So it's been a matter of time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sally. Marquis was the last professional horse racing track in the province, was it not?
Pretty sure. I don't think there's one anywhere else at this point.
I know there's some like chuck wagon tracks and stuff, but they're not built for like professional horse racing.
Yeah, like Marquis is, Marquis is your standard horse racing track, professional horse racing track. So
okay, good. Well, I mean, let's be honest, it's a bad look. Just the way it's kind of been framed, whether that's from the media or the timing from the comments from Prairieland. Obviously, they're not great. But so you never want to see soccer come in and kind of look like the bad guy, particularly when you're trying to launch something off the ground. So hopefully some of these comments can get cleared up and people can kind of understand what's going on there. JP, I just wanted to get your thoughts just on the league expanding as a whole. And is Saskatoon perhaps the right move for team number 9 in the Canadian Premier League?
I think it was a great announcement in that, let's be honest, it's been a difficult month of headlines for the CPL. Some of the things that were being talked about on social media, very difficult time for them, to the point where, it got the CPL to release salary numbers. And then all of a sudden you have this kind of announcement out of the blue. So I think that was a real positive to get things kind of going the right way again for the league, to get people talking about a positive, hopefully a schedule soon. We need some good stories from that league to come out. And this is, for me, certainly a great story to come out. Edmonton, Valor, Calgary, they need another local rival. And I think when you start to look at the CFL rivalries that exist amongst these cities, well, now you've just added that at the at the CPL level, which is brilliant. You know, Saskatchewan as a province deserves a professional team. There's some real dedicated football people there, a dedicated youth kind of grassroots, you know, program growing up. Some really good people in that province. I'm delighted for them. But again, for the league to announce team number 9 coming out of a pandemic, you know, everyone talks about there's a lot of social media, the demise of the CPL, and are they going to survive this? Well, here's an ownership group that, regardless of the pandemic, has committed to the CPL because they like something they see in the CPL. I think this is a great news story for everyone involved. I think the people in the league office at CPL, who I don't always agree with, but certainly this is one where they should be commended, and they should be commended for keeping it quiet. And thankfully this story wasn't leaked, you know, a couple hours like the York rebranding as an example. So yeah, good job to everyone. Delighted to see this organization grow.
So from Saskatoon, I'm just going to say, Sally, I'll get to you in a sec. Saskatoon to Edmonton is about 5 or 6 hours. To Calgary, it's 6 hours, and to Winnipeg, it's about 8 hours. I'm born and bred Saskatchewan. I still consider it home. I'm thrilled for the people there. I'm very happy for Valor fans because they're no longer on their island by themselves. They have a rival and someone within reasonable driving distance. So I'm really happy for them. I'm really happy to see Al in charge, someone who is also born and bred in Saskatchewan. He understands the market, understands what the fans will be looking for as well. I'm really happy for guys like Sally who have been championing Saskatchewan soccer forever and ever and ever. So Sally, just your group, the Wheat Pool, Bridge City Firm, even the guys in Regina, who you guys commonly talk with, you must all just be over the moon and in the next planning stages and trying to help out as much as you can.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. The Wheat Pool, we had a group meeting on Thursday night. And, you know, what the meeting was really just talking about, well, what can we kind of do to keep some type of momentum going with, you know, wanting to push having a pro team here. What are we going to do for the upcoming World Cup qualifiers and Olympic qualifying games? You know, it was a fairly kind of what became standard for us, where there really wasn't anything to look for on the horizon at this point. We just needed to try and kind of keep something going in the hopes that something would materialize, you know, once we got out of the pandemic. Like I said in the CPL interview I did, that, you know, we honestly thought that everything pro soccer here was dead in the water. Joe had basically silently walked away. You know, like I say, we knew that Al kind of had something happening in the background with Living Skies, but man, did they stay tight-lipped on that. I don't know who was controlling communications from that group, but not a person had any clue. The only Saskatchewan person that had any idea what was going on besides Al was Don Story, who's one of the board of director members for Canada Soccer. I commend him for staying tight-lipped, because he and I have phone conversations every once in a while, and I press him every time to get any little bit of info that I can. So I'll have to buy him a beer for this one. But, you know, it was surreal coming into the Wheat Pool meeting, the basically emergency Wheat Pool meeting that we called Friday night, just so all of us could kind of get together and decompress after what we had all been going through the entire day. And now the conversation went from, you know, how do we try and keep momentum going with what's basically a raft floating in the ocean, to how are we going to handle this tidal wave that's eventually going to come in and just smash into the group. And I mean, there's a couple of Facebook groups besides the Wheat Pool group. We have the Bring CPL to Pro Soccer to Regina and Saskatoon Soccer Supporters. They're two different Facebook groups. Rob Notenboom looks after the Regina one. I look after the Saskatoon one. And the whole goal of those is just, you know, try and trickle a few people in every once in a while that might have interest in paying attention to anything pro soccer happening in either city. And in the hopes of, you know, growing a bit more of a groundswell for support for that movement. And like an hour after the announcement happened, people just started flooding into both groups, because now suddenly things were real, right? So yeah, it's been a whirlwind.
So just quickly, Sally, where did the SK Selects play their matches?
They played at SMF Field, Saskatoon Minor
Oh,
Football Field,
okay.
Gordie Howe Bowl.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, and I mean, the way that Joe always talked about it is working with the folks at SMF was harder than pulling your own teeth out. There was a very poor relationship happening there. They wouldn't even take out the football uprights, things like that. The idea of potentially painting over the football lines was basically met with something just slightly less than death threats. So
well, we've seen that
impossible.
pretty much everywhere, I think, when it comes to soccer
Clark
and minor
Field,
football.
right?
Clark is a great example.
Yeah.
This year, actually, the two junior football teams in Edmonton were set to actually move to Jasper Place Bowl, a different location altogether, except when they played each other. They just wanted the extra space so they could keep fans of both teams on both sides. They would play at Clark when the Wildcats and the Huskies played each other. But so obviously this will be a soccer specific stadium at the Marquis Downs location.
Yes.
Al in his interview said 2023 would be the earliest. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that everything kind of keeps moving forward. And yeah, it's just great news and it's really exciting. And I know it kind of, oh, go ahead, Sally, one more thought.
I'll just say, I know you're kind of wrapping this one up, but
yeah,
I just want to add, so if people are curious where things actually are at this point, so where things really are is Marquis Downs was already earmarked to go. Prairie Land had already made that decision. Nothing was going to change that. It was done. Prairie Land Park was created, I can't remember what year it was, but it was ages ago. And it is zoned as agricultural zoning land.
Right, yeah.
Because its traditional use is for agricultural expos. The Beef Growers Association of Saskatchewan still uses Prairie Land Park as their AGM and main trade show location. There's even though the Saskatoon exhibition is essentially a carnival, there's still a large agricultural portion to that. So horse racing in the province is regarded as an agricultural activity. So Marquis Downs, being on Prairie Land's land, was still under this agricultural zoning, but building a stadium for sports doesn't fall under that. So where the actual battle is going to take place now is between Prairie Land Park and the city of Saskatoon, because what needs to now happen is that entire area of land that Marquis was on, needs to be rezoned by the city to allow Al and Prairie Land to build the stadium and turn it into a soccer venue. So, it's really now going to come down to how they're able to negotiate that. Because right now Prairie Land Park pays, I think, like $100 only in annual property tax because of this grandfathered MOU they've had with the city since that area was created. So, what's going to happen with that? There's the tax implication that's going to happen. The actual zoning of the land has to change, and other things too. Like, because now parking is going to have to be fully split between the convention center and the actual stadium location, logistics for the whole area. So 2023 is optimistic. If we see a team on the pitch by 2025, I'll be really happy. So I think we have a few years to go before we should expect to see a team. Yeah,
that's fair. There's a lot of buildup, and like you said, a lot of logistics going to fight through. I just keep laughing now because every time I think of Living Skies, Saskatchewan is the land of Living Skies. That's what right in the license plate. But that's the name of the casino in Swift Current too, is Living Sky Casino.
So, yeah, that's right.
Anyway, so
I appreciate the lesson. Right now I've heard about Wheat Pool, the beef. What is it? The Beef Growers Association.
Yeah, Saskatchewan Beef Growers Association.
Prairie Land Park sounds like a place that Griswold would visit on one of their movies. So thank you for this.
This is the big city boy getting a little bit of prairie education right now.
That's
agricultural land for me was a grocery store. So yeah.
So
IGA.
Yeah. We're really looking forward to some more news coming out of Saskatchewan, and hopefully just the start for expansion in the Canadian Premier League. But I think the one thing to take from this is that while it's not an official expansion announcement per se, since it's all hinging on a couple of deals, it is part of the league's, I guess, increased clarity, a little bit more transparency we're seeing from the Canadian Premier League. And another one of those things that came out this week was salaries. They announced that each team has a salary cap of $1.2 million. That's split between coaching staff and players. The player floor is $650,000, with the ceiling being at $850,000, and then the coach's floor is $350,000, with the ceiling being at $550,000. Obviously, you can't have the two add up to more than $1.2 million. JP, do you like seeing these numbers? Do they give a little bit of context now to some of the roster moves that we saw this past offseason?
They certainly do. I like seeing the numbers. I'm not sure I like seeing the individual team breakdowns and making people guess on what team spent what. I think that puts some of the coaches under a bit of pressure, but I like the transparency. I think the transparency is required because there was a lot of misinformation. I said this a few shows ago that some of the numbers being set out there by some individuals were just 100% false. No team spent $500,000 or whatever those numbers were a couple of weeks back. So these numbers put some clarity to that. You know, they've identified that things such as accommodations and whatnot go on the salary cap. Player insurance is the other piece that was there, because you saw on the list that came out, the most recent one where it broke down by team, and I think the highest was 733,000, I believe it was. Well, the remainder of that is actually player insurance, but it also falls under the cap. So teams were hitting that threshold of that 750 number for the most part. And there were some ways to get to the 850 by classifying a couple of players as coaches, as senior players, as leaders that way. So you could play around up to that 850 mark like they've released. I mean, obviously these are numbers I was sitting on all the time. You know, I've not shared them, and I kept these pretty private. You know, and I've said on this show already a few times that I won't release information the league's not released that I have privately, out of respect for my colleagues and out of respect for the league that I want to see survive. This is a good move by the league. This shows that at the end of the day, the reality is this is a brand new league. Salary cap's required. There's been some comparisons, you know, in some of the old Division II talk that we had in 2 podcasts ago. You know, someone compared the NASL versus the USL and how that was a problem with 2 people. Well, that wasn't the problem. The problem was that the USL maintained wages properly and the NASL had no salary cap. And you had a couple of teams, for example, Miami in particular, came in and, you know, their salary cap was probably about $3 million that year. I mean, they paid $750,000 in a transfer fee for Richie Ryan, which will upset the Ottawa fans because Ottawa Fury sold him to Jacksonville for about $17,000. So, and then he was sold about 6 weeks later for $750,000.
Yeah. So
bad bit of business, but so that's what hurt that league, and that's why the NASL doesn't exist anymore. It's because the salaries got out of hand and the payrolls. This information now, I think, allows the supporters of the league to kind of justify some of the salaries being paid. They know what the numbers are. Hopefully, we all want this league to be here in 10 years, and if it's going to be here in 10 years, these are the numbers that we have to work with. Nothing else is realistic. We're not getting 6,000 fans. You know, average attendance is what's required to break even without sponsorship. 6,000 to 7,000, depending on the city. We're getting 2,000, you know, in Edmonton. So if we want teams to be around, we have to realize that there's going to be some you know, tight wallets, I guess, you know, in the short term.
Yeah. And
Jeff, we get 2,000 in a regular Saskatoon pub on a Friday night. So I don't know what that's
what else is there to do? I mean, what do you're not going to watch professional soccer?
Nothing right now until soccer comes, right? I should say another one of the numbers that came out was the minimum. They bumped it up to 22,000. And then with housing, et cetera, it could be 26, I think is what the number is. That's big too. Because I know some of the younger kids weren't making very much at all. Obviously, some of the U Sports contracts will be a little bit different because you're only paying them for 3 months or whatever it is. But Sally, obviously a bump for the minimum. I think the PFA can said 30 players got a call and said that their salaries were getting raised. That's a big step too, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I think the whole big picture of the salary releases, or rather the financial release by the league, shows the most important thing from it is it shows that the league is willing to listen and learn. Those are the 2 things. And like up until this point, we hadn't really seen anything from the league to show that they were actually listening and cared about some of the criticism that was coming out about them. So now that we know that player min wages are going up, now that we've seen this financial breakdown of what the figures look like for the clubs, it's a big. The CPL has been doing some repair work. All of this that's been coming out here this spring is all about doing repair work to the league's image. Now we have these financials. They've made the statement by bringing in Saskatchewan as an expansion club. I have no illusions about kind of the bigger picture of the whole expansion club announcement. It's one of a series of things that I think the league is going to do here this spring in preparation for this summer season, in repairing its image and showing that it's growing as a league, right? That they're two pretty big statement things to do. So I'm just really happy to see the league's growth in the bigger picture. And I'm excited to see what else they do here in the next little bit that's going to continue to show that they're willing to grow and become more transparent.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sally. I agree with that. Final question for you on this topic, JP. With, you can spend $850 on players, but you'd only be spending $350 on coaches, or vice versa, $650 on players, $550 on coaches. How do teams balance the line between having, enough staff to put out a competitive team to teach the players they have, but making sure that they're paying and bringing in enough players who are good enough to fill the roster, to field a competitive team? How do you find that balance between coaching salary and player salaries?
This is an interesting question for me.
Yeah.
I mean, last year at FC Edmonton, I was, head coach, travel planner, sports psychologist.
Yeah.
I was the acting general manager. So how do you balance? My goodness. You know what? You have to, if we're going to professionalize, if we're going to grow the game a little bit, we also need to really focus on the coaching staff. Proper video analysts, for example, someone that can read the data that's available and provide that kind of performance analysis to the team and to the coaching staff is required. So the coaching staffs have to grow, and I don't like where they're attached. I have to say, I don't like that you have to play with numbers here. I think that, again, if we want to grow the game, then let's professionalize the teams as much as we can. And the coaching staff should be a separate budget. It shouldn't be tied to, well, if we save $100,000 here, we can spend it here. Well, no, let's get in the staff that we need to help our players all get better individually, to help the quality on the pitch get better and whatnot. So I'm not a fan of that. It's a very difficult, thing that you have to answer. We had a smaller staff at FC Edmonton. And, at the end of the day, I think that's probably hurt us. I love the staff that we had at FC Edmonton, every one of them, Sean, Vic, and Lars, but that's a big demand for those three plus me. And I'm also trying to be the interim GM. I mean, how do four guys run a professional football club? I think we showed that. I guess we probably struggled at it. And that's not against my staff. They were wonderful. So it's a difficult one. But I actually want to go just to an earlier comment that you made, because, and this might be the first bit of hate mail that I'll get when we talk about the league minimum salary going up. And I understand the need for the league minimum salary to go up for the players that are graduating university, because how do you tell a 23-year-old, 24-year-old that put your engineering degree you just got on hold and we're going to pay you $20,000 or $15,000 to play professional football? Makes no sense. Where the issue I have with it, though, is for those 17-year-olds now. Because in the old NASL days, you could pay an entry-level salary. We had no salary cap at FC Edmonton. Our payroll in our final year was substantially higher than the numbers that the leagues released for the CPL. But yet we still had entry-level players, 17-year-olds that would come on the team, 16-year-olds that would come on the team. And how much do they need to get paid when they're living at home? They've got no expenses. They're being fed by mom or dad or both. How much do they need? And if you go anywhere around the world to this day, there's still young players, 16, 17, 18 at lower leagues throughout Europe trying to become a full pro and a top pro, making $300 a week, $400 a week, whatever it is. I think that by having a league minimum, are we going to start to see now over the next couple of years, fewer 17, 18-year-olds sign? Because now you've got to commit, and you're committing a larger chunk of your salary cap to a player that you're bringing in for their development. You're trying to help them. You're going to get the minutes when you can. You're going to train all the time with pros, make them a better player. But now you've got to think about the salary cap hit. So I think that that's a detriment to the young Canadian player that I'd like to see in this league. So that's my only opinion on the minimum salary, how it's going to affect. But back to
Right.
the original question, Gray. Yeah, it's a tough one for staffs. You need a proper staff though, and I don't think it should be tied to a
Yeah.
number.
I think the argument for the point you just made regarding the young Canadians is, well, I'm trying to think across the league, but honestly, Edmonton would be the only ones who are bringing in their own 17-year-olds who would be living at home. So maybe
Right.
we see it a little bit differently in that sense. But I do
Fair.
agree. You make a good point. Actually, I hadn't even considered that. Yeah, if you want to invest in a young 17-year-old Canadian player, like that is a good chunk of change to put into that. And again, with nowhere to put them, no feeder system, you got to play them. So then we get into the whole D2 thing, and it just goes on and on. And
Well, my
yeah,
attitude was great. I mean, I would rather develop my own 17-year-old for the next 3-4 years, so that they have 4 years of professional football by the time they're 21. Marcus Valado, Segay is my example, versus seeing a player off to university for 4 years and then maybe seeing what they're like in 4 years' time. That wasn't for me. Developing my own was.
so let's get some academies, basically, is what this all comes down to again at the end of the day.
There we
Almost.
go. There's it.
So let's move on. We had a lot of good feel-good news this week too out of the Canadian Premier League, but a little bit of controversy once again. And again, it's surrounding the Voyageurs Cup. So basically, last weekend, Bob Young came out, put out a letter and said, how can CSA do this to us? Blah, blah, blah. We can't train, et cetera, which to me just seemed like a last second desperation ploy to make everyone else look like a bad guy and not his team, which, I mean, fair play. You got to protect your assets, whatever. So it come out earlier this week, pardon me, that Toronto FC would get the CCL spot as Forge basically ceded that to them. But in return, Forge would host the 2020 Voyageurs Cup final at a later to be determined date once we got some fans, etc., in the stadium. I'm not even sure if they'll be able to get that final played before they start the 2021 V Cup. Well, hopefully they do, because that would make the most sense. But what do you guys make of this whole situation? Sally, we'll start with you. It's a bit of a cluster, but I think this is the outcome that is the most logical and makes the most sense considering the situation both teams are in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, where I sit on this is that Canada Soccer really dropped the ball on this whole thing. It really is their fault, in my opinion. There were, in my opinion, there was ample opportunity last fall to either send Forge to Hartford, or have the game played at, let's say, Exploria in Orlando when Forge was on their way back from bombing against Arcahey. There were options. I'm sure there should have been options to play this game when both clubs were in form, had their full rosters. Instead of just sitting on it. I mean, I would love to see I look forward to the eventual ESPN 30 for 30 episode on this whole thing that somebody hopefully creates in the future once all the actual details can come out. Because I can't imagine that if you would have given TFC and Forge that scenario that they can play this game while their clubs are both in form, at a venue, either, however it would have had to work, that they wouldn't have taken the opportunity. And I honestly think that Forge would have given TFC a hell of a game last fall. Would they have won? Probably not. But would they have at least made a genuine match out of it? Would it have been a tighter game? Absolutely. You would have given David Edgar sort of his swan song at that final. He wouldn't have had a crowd, but who cares? I mean, what matters is getting the competition finished. So, yeah, I'm just really disappointed with how it's all unfolded in the end. I just feel like there was too much hesitancy on Canada Soccer's end, and that they really dropped the ball on this one, because now, if you ask me, Forge is the one who's really left holding the bag. Sure, they're going to get a final, and maybe it does end up being a decent financial windfall, but at the same time, they lose their opportunity to actually represent the nation in the Champions League. So it is what it is.
No, that's fair. But I can almost guarantee that everyone in the CSA was hoping to all ends that Forge didn't botch it against Haiti or had that second opportunity against a tougher team. To be fair to Forge, they had two chances to get in their own way. and they blew it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, Canada Soccer also blew it by not scheduling the match last fall as well. JP, what do you make of this whole scenario? Is someone to blame? Is there, what do you make?
It's a tough one. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus yet, only because COVID has made everything we do much more difficult. And we're in a pandemic. So we all know the easy answers without a pandemic, but we've added a pandemic now. And this decision they've made makes the most sense for me. I'm actually all for this, and I'm all for it for the big reason that the winner of this game, I mean, they're not training, Forge. They're unable to train. And yet they have to be ready. Had they have won that game, we have to be ready to play Club Leon on April 7th. No chance. No chance. So do you force a game when you're not ready to play in the hopes that you may get through it when TFC is training, only to go into this and potentially be embarrassed, by a pretty big Mexican club? I think they've done the smart thing. I think for the growth of the organization, give Bobby his team, give Bobby time to work on his team, give them a date that they're going to play on their field and host. They could pack that stadium for that game, which I'm sure they're going to get great numbers out. So it'll be potentially the largest attendance numbers at a CPL game in its short history. That's great. Massive gate, massive interest. And now you're giving Bobby a full roster because he's still missing a center back. He's still not signed a center back yet to replace. So let's give him time to finish up that roster of his. Let's give him time to build and work on his team. And then at a later date, I fancy the chances against anybody because I fancy Bobby against any manager in a one-off game.
And Forge have not played TFC, and I think that's a match that since the start of the CPL, a lot of fans in that area of the world have really looked forward to. And it's interesting, JP, that you say that Forge hasn't been able to train, and that's been kind of the cry on social media as well. It's like, well, if TFC can train, why can't Forge train? And I think part of that, some of the blame has to fall on the Canadian Premier League, because Toronto FC can go to the government and say, look, here's our MLS schedule. It starts on this day. We have a game, against who they put out the home openers and stuff now, so it's all out there. But we have to go to Orlando for here. We need to be in Mexico on April 7th, whereas Forge would take their application to Ontario Health, and OHS would look at them and go, what's your league's plan? Why do we have to give you permission to train when you don't have any games coming up?
Right.
What do you guys make of that thought? Sally?
Yeah, no, it's bang on. I mean, it's so difficult though, because, I think you probably had a bit of an internal battle happening between owners in the league who, want to try and save on costs. And because, the league is still quite heavily gate revenue driven, they can't afford to start playing games with nobody in attendance. I just think, there's too many tight-pocketed owners. We always like to talk about how other people can spend their money, but you get into professional, as an owner, professional football, not because you're wanting to try and make a financial windfall out of it. At least that's why you should get into owning a professional football club. So I hate the tightwads, but they're the ones that kind of cause this issue. Again, I hope it all comes out when somebody eventually makes the tell-all story about how this whole thing played out, because it'd be great viewing.
Yeah.
No,
but we need a
true.
good game as well, right?
Yes.
Sorry, Greg, go ahead if you want to jump in.
No.
Okay. We need a good game. At the end of the day, Canada Soccer knows this, and Canada Soccer was really stuck with that. Who do they appease here? Who do they, they could have done it at the end of last year, but that might not have worked for TFC because they had stopped playing games for a while as well. Their season was done. They would have to come back in quarantine to play in Canada because they were playing in all their games down in the States at the height of the pandemic coming in. Very difficult. And then in this scenario, they would be Forge that would be hurt by it. So, we still have to, there's still, for me, I have a lot of respect for, number one, the women's game in our country, because that put soccer in Canada on the map worldwide. It wasn't through the men's game recently. It was always through the women's game that we got, so much press and so much publicity. It's because of what that team did in the Olympics back to back, the work that was happening there. And then if you want to look at the men's side, though, we have to be thankful to Montreal and TFC and Vancouver, because without them, do we have the player pool that we have now, at our senior national team and all the work they put in their academies and all the money they're submitting themselves into their player development programs. They've been doing this for years. So, this isn't an anti-TFC thing, not for me. I'm very pro MLS programs, what they do for our country. So everyone had to be appeased here. And I think this is the solution to do it.
You're just a nice guy all around,
Yeah.
hey, Jeff?
That's true, though. No, it's true. Where would we be right now without those 3 MLS academies in this country? We'd be right where we were in the 90s.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think this is the scenario that makes the most sense at the end of the day, given that they didn't play it last fall. So anyways, we'll look forward to that final when it eventually does happen. The squads will be a little bit different, but I'm sure that'll really kickstart that Hamilton TFC rivalry that I think a lot of people have been looking forward to. Later this week, fellas, big moment for our U23s on the men's side is Olympic qualifying kicks off. Canada, when you look at the group, you go, oh, that's not bad. Honduras, I mean, FH, but whatever. El Salvador is in there. Haiti. You look, that's a group that you could be top two. So top two from each of the two groups go on, and the two semifinal winners will be in Tokyo for the Olympics. Now you look at the group and go, that's not a bad group, but obviously then guess who's in the other side? Mexico, the United States, Costa Rica. So your semifinal, which was always probably going to be up against either Mexico or the United States, is what's going to happen. What do you guys make of Canada's chances here? The roster has been out for a couple of days. They're training as the event takes place in Guadalajara. What do you guys make of the chances here, Sally? Why don't you have the first crack?
Yeah, I don't know a ton about a lot of the players on this roster. There's some names that, were notable that were left off, likely because they're going to be taking part in the full men's side during World Cup qualifying, like Teo Corbeanu. He was left off, so you have to assume that he'll probably be showing up on the men's full squad roster. But yeah, there's the kid. What's his last name? He's Spanish last name. Everybody's been really hyping him. I'm hoping one of you two can.
The Portuguese kid who's 18.
I think
playing
so.
for Sporting.
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's on there. So they'll be interesting to see. I mean, there are some new faces that, a lot of us aren't familiar with, haven't really been able to see before, that we're going to finally get to see with this team. So, anytime you're playing in anywhere Mexico or South, that always seems to make it that much more difficult. At least this time of year, in Guadalajara, it's not going to be, 120 degrees Fahrenheit at kickoff. So hopefully temperatures aren't going to be that big of a factor, but you can never take any of the Central American sides lightly. I mean, a lot of these players that are playing on Honduras, they are already getting minutes in the Honduran National League, right? And same thing for a couple of the other teams. So, you never know exactly what you're going to get. You get some of the absolute top end shithousery of CONCACAF happening in these tournaments, so how are these younger players going to compensate with that? How are they going to mentally be able to get past the antics that they're going to be facing in these games? Because who's our first? I think our first opponent is Honduras, isn't it? I want to say.
I was just there. Lucas Diaz was the kid you're thinking of.
Yeah, Lucas Diaz. Yeah,
18 years old, playing for Sporting in Portugal. It's El Salvador first.
Right.
That's on Friday, the 19th. Haiti on the 22nd. So that's Monday. And then on the Thursday is Honduras as the last match. And that's the same day that Canada plays Bermuda on the men's side.
Exactly. But I mean, if this was the men's national team having to go to those places for World Cup qualifiers, we'd all be sweating. Yes. Because those are just not great places for our players to be playing. In the worst way of putting that. Yeah, in the most layman's terms, it's just, that's those types of countries are where Canadian men's national teams go to die, really. So we just have to hope that our players are, going to be able to get past a lot of the, like I say, the garbage antics that they're going to face with, especially, El Salvador and Haiti. All three of them. I mean, God, it's going to be frustrating to watch. If we go behind, it's going to just go hyperspeed. We're going to just see some of the worst garbage you can see in CONCACAF. So it's going to be a roller coaster.
Yeah, CONCACAFing, I'm sure, will be in full effect. Yeah. I guess maybe the one kind of neutralizer is it is a neutral site. unless they play Mexico, but I don't think that fans will be in anyway if it does. JP, 2 CPL players, Thomas Voyageur, David Norman, recently signed with Cavalry, are the 2 CPL players. What do you make of this? Are you maybe glad that Mexico and the US aren't in the group stage, or would you like to see them play one of those tougher opponents, in the group stage before facing the other one in a potential semifinal?
Yeah, it might have been nice to have gotten one of the top 2 in your own round, and knowing that you're potentially going to play the other one, then the semi, and hope for that one-off win. I don't mind that. Flip side being, match fitness is a concern. I think with much of this roster, how much have they played? How really are they ready to compete at that level for 90 minutes? Will injuries become a concern because of, trying to get them ready in a short period of time without a lot of play over the last many, many months? That's my concern. So maybe in a sense, not having to play one of them early, being able to kind of build your way into the tournament, and try to build up some of this match fitness over those first 3 games could be a positive, could be a benefit there. Yeah, it's tough to say. I think this roster's there's probably as big a question as to who's not there as who is, because of TFC's COVID situation. Apparently, Kerry Patton is not here, and that'd be a player that I think would be a very good one for this roster, not being released by his club in Scotland, so he could sit on the bench on the weekend. But
and then, of course, Sally mentioned it too. There's the overlap with the men's senior team, because they have qualifiers on the 25th and the 28th, which I believe is 25th is the last match day of the round robin for the U23s, and I think the 28th would then be the semifinal date. So that's tough to prioritize. Like, you want your kids to go to the Olympics, but at the same time, these are World Cup qualifiers, and even though it's Bermuda and oh man, who's the other one? Virgin Islands?
Suriname?
No, Suriname. Yeah, I don't know. One of the a really tiny country who we shouldn't worry about. Like, should we have maybe prioritized the U23s and not the World Cup qualifiers?
But I think John Hurban's been pretty. I think when John was in charge of the women's program, he was also very organized and very open about this is about creating getting the senior team ready to play in events. And anything underneath senior national team football was development opportunities for that team. So I think it's probably holding that as the priority for the country. And any game, regardless of position for us, should be a game to develop that team, so that it's not necessarily beating Bermuda, Suriname, or whatever. It's actually getting those match minutes in so you can compete against Mexico and United States. That's maybe where the line of thinking is.
I don't think that's a wrong thought either. I'm just saying, like, those are 2 matches that we shouldn't be worried about. Maybe we should have tried to put out the best U23 squad that we could, because qualifying for the Olympics was always going to be a massive ask with only 2 spots, and Mexico and the United States probably the favorites to get those 2 spots. Although the US hasn't qualified for an Olympics, I think, since 2008. Right. I might be wrong there, but it's been a couple of years, I think, that they've missed out. I think it's been Mexico and the Ticos for the last couple of years. But anyways, gentlemen, I think we've kind of reached that time. It's probably time to go do something else with your Sunday afternoon. Maybe watch some curling or something. But JP, why don't you let the folks know where we can find you online?
I am Jeff_Paulus on Twitter, and to the city of Saskatoon and your new soccer venture. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop there besides getting gas.
Where are you going? You're stopping in Saskatoon to get gas?
Toronto. I've done the drive to Toronto 3 times. I'm never doing it again, but I've done it 3 times. It's painful.
No, thank you. Yeah.
Do you take the north route or do you take the south route through the US?
I won't give the Americans my money, so I take the north route.
Isn't it like way quicker though?
What's that?
Doesn't it cut like 8 hours off your trip to go south?
I don't know. I've never done it.
Well, anyways, Sally, I know you're all over the place. Here's a chance to give out some shout outs to where we can find you.
Yeah. So you can always find me on Twitter at Jeff D. Salisbury. You can also, I am one of the main kind of controllers of the Wheat Pool's Twitter now. So at the Wheat Pool SK. I know you're envious, Jeff. You don't have to make those faces.
I just love the hoity-toity. Yeah.
You know what? I mean, I realized you were the big star of this show, but I didn't realize how important you are outside of the show. So
that's right. you need to recognize, son. Yeah, and then I'm always on all the different CPL fan groups on Facebook, the Voyageurs on Facebook, and even the CPL Discord. Find me on there. So there's officially a Saskatchewan area of the CPL Discord has officially been created now. So
there we go. Moving up in the world, the 306. You can find me at Grayson Knutson on Twitter. Be sure to follow the Vodcast podcast at the Cynical Challenge 1, Cynical Challenge on YouTube. Find us also on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all your favorite catchers. Gentlemen, an absolute pleasure to talk footy with you. Let's do it again real soon.
See you.
Toodles.